Needlebug, 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 needlebug. If you're perplexed by stitching mysteries, stick around, there's something here for you. Getting old is not for sissies, so Karen's focusing on something new. Learn a little, stay a little, stitch a little, love a little. Learn a little, stay a little, stitch a little, love a little.
Well, good morning, everybody. This is Karen, and I thought today we'd add to our book of knowledge. And today we're going to add how to start and how to end your threads. Something I get a lot of questions on, so I went through all the different ways that I have started and ended threads and tried to put them all together for this video, so that you have one place to look for all the options that are out there. Some of the ways that I will show you today are quite common and used a lot. There are a few that are, probably not heard of very often, if at all. So let's get started. I thought today we would start with a piece of Aida cloth for the simple reason that that's a little bit easier to demonstrate some things on. And anything I will specify if it's just a start that you can do on Aida, or if it is a start that you can also do on an even weave or linen. So we'll talk about that along the way. I'm going to try to do the ones that are the same on both types of fabric first. I have the lists here in front of me, so bear with me as I try and sort through this, because I made the list, but I didn't exactly put them in an order. So we're going to work through this a little bit. Okay, well, and then we're going to bump the camera and get it all messed up. Typical Karen video, isn't it? Okay, there we go. So hopefully we are back in frame now. Okay, your most common way to start, if you have threads already, if you have stitching already started, probably the easiest way to start, and I'm not going to demonstrate that, is to just work your end under the existing threads in the back. Come up to the front and keep on stitching. And I think that's pretty common, that it really doesn't need an explanation. The way to end threads is also a pretty common way of just flip it over to the back and work your end underneath. So I'm not going to demonstrate that, because that's something that is very common. Most people do and most people have done. However, when you don't have anything on your fabric, how do I start my thread? Well, let's look at that. There are a number of different ways. I think the first way that most people, when they were taught how to stitch, and most people have done, is to just actually hold your thread on the back of your fabric. So a lot of folks just basically came up, I'm going to start it way up here, okay, came up through their fabric, okay, don't want to pull it all the way through, and I'm trying to feel here when I get close to the end. Okay, but they come up through their fabric, held the tail on the back, went down, and caught that tail. I mean, this is the way I learned in the very, very beginning. And you stitched over that tail, and then you just made sure that you continued to stitch over that tail for a few stitches, and then you were fine. Okay, so this was the most common way to start, and what a lot of us older stitchers, when we first started back in the cave days, what we learned in the beginning. Okay, so that's one way. And what we did at this point was turned our fabric over and worked our thread underneath the existing stitches in order to end it. So that's one thing you can do. I think these days, what I have adapted it to, and what's a little easier for me, is to do an away thread. Okay, so essentially it's the same as when you held the fabric, the thread with your finger on the back. Essentially it's the same, but instead of holding it with your finger, you go a few stitches away, go down through your fabric, come up where you want to start. Now I always stitch bottom left to top right. Okay, so I'm going to come up through my fabric. I'm not going to pull that tail all the way through, so that way I don't have to hold it on the back, and I'm just going to do my X's. Okay, and not get that tail from the other set of stitching caught in there. Should have cut that off closer, shouldn't I? Let's get rid of it so it doesn't annoy us. There we go. So you're just stitching over it. When you've stitched over it a few times, you can just trim that off. Okay, so that's another way that you can start your threads. And this works on both. Both of these are good to do on both Aida cloth and an even weaver linen. Works the same way. So I'm not going to demonstrate it on an even weave because it's exactly what you have seen me do here. This is 14 count Aida cloth, and I am only using one strand of floss just to make it a little easier for you to see. One of the ways, now that I have done some stitches, again, is I can flip it over and weave back underneath the stitches to end it, or I could do an away thread, which is just pulling my thread up a few stitches away, and then this next color I would stitch over that thread. Now you say, well, what if I'm going to put a new color in here and I have this thread out here? What you can do is the same thing. Start your new color just the way we started this. Come up here, do your required X's, and then you're actually stitching over both threads, which is perfectly fine. So that is certainly a way to handle that. Okay, so that's the easiest ways to start. Okay, I'm kind of looking at my notes here to make sure I'm going to hit everything. So we did an away thread. We did the hold the tail in the back and stitch over. We did put the tail in the, okay, that's another note. Okay, another one that is pretty common, and I'll be honest, it's easier done on an Aida cloth or on an even weave when you're stitching over two is the easiest way to do this. But another start and stop is a pin stitch. So if you're going to do a pin stitch, the way to start that is take your thread, go down in the center of your square. Okay, so you're going to split your threads. Let me get you in a little bit closer here so that you can see that a little bit easier. Pull you a little bit towards me. There we go. Okay, so I have gone down. I have split the threads, the horizontal and the vertical threads of this square. Well, I wasn't quite in the center, so let me try that again. There we go. Okay, so we went down in the center. Now, what I look at is, can you see here how some of the top, in the weave of the fabric, you have threads that are going over top. If you look horizontally, you have threads that are going over top, then they kind of go underneath, and they come up on top again. So what you want to look at the point that you're starting is which directions are these top threads going? Are they horizontal or are they vertical? Well, in this particular case, they happen to be horizontal. I'm sorry, they happen to be vertical. So I'm going to pull my thread through, and I'm going to leave a bit of a tail. I'm going to hold that down. And what I'm going to do is split. I'm going to go above the thread that's going horizontally. I'm going to split the vertical thread, pull my needle up. I'm going to hold this tail, and I'm going to go back down in the middle and pierce it again. Okay. Now I'm going to move this tail out of the way. Now see, already you can see that's not going to, I mean, I'm really tugging on that. That is not going to pull out. Then I'm going to split the vertical thread again in the middle underneath that. Bring my thread up, hold this tail out of the way, hold it to the side, and go down in the middle again. Now, that pretty much will hide that stitch. So what I will do now is cut this tail off. Okay. So that really is very secure. It's not gonna go anywhere. And you will really find that out if you have to, God bless you, frog. You'll have fun removing that. So now you can just start your X as you would usually start your X and do your stitching and move merrily across. However, do you only have 5 stitches to do? Can you use the whole length of thread? I'm not used to stitching on Aida cloth, can you tell? Well, I guess I'm a 20 count. I've stitched a lot on. I'm not used to this big fabric. So I'm just going to stitch a few stitches, and then I will show you a pin stitch end. Now, when I first started doing the end of or ending with a pin stitch, and you still can, I did the pin stitch in the very next square, either this square or underneath. It didn't matter. You really don't have to go away from, go like way down here and do it. You can do it right in this next one because that pin stitch is so secure, it's not going to come undone. Okay, so let's do it that way today. So to end with a pin stitch, again, up in the center, pull it through. Sorry, bump the camera. Again, look which direction these top threads are going. These again are going vertically because this one is horizontal, this one's vertical. So that would dictate the way, because if you follow that weave of the fabric, it hides your pin stitch better. If you go against that weave, it's not going to pull into the fabric as much. And I'll show you that in a second. So I'm going to go down in the top. I'm going to come up in the center again. I'm going to go down, split it and go down underneath. I'm going to come up in the center again. Now, if you want to do one more for extra measure, you certainly can, although it is not necessary. But I will go down once more. And there's, and I'll probably just come up anywhere and clip my thread off. Now that one got a little bit thick because I went down again. But let me show you what happens if you do a pin stitch that goes against the weave of the fabric. So let's start a thread. We're going to come up in the center. Okay. And this again is a vertical, top thread's vertical. Okay. So instead of going vertically, I'm going to go horizontally. So if I go down to the side, come up in the center, and then go down to the side, and up in the center. And I'm just going to cut that off because that's secure. Do you see the difference? It leaves a bit. Now, that one's a bit bulkier because I went down twice. This one is really bulkier. Let's see if I can get you in a little bit more. See, it leaves a much larger footprint, which is a little bit harder to hide. So you want to look at the direction of the top threads at that intersection, whatever thread is laying on top. And this is true for an even weave or linen also. I'm just going to pull this fabric up underneath here to show you. Okay, you can see it on here, on this. You can see that here's a there we go. Here's a horizontal, the next one's a vertical, the next one's a horizontal. So if you go with whatever intersection you're crossing, look at the top fabric thread and see what direction is that fabric thread going. And then that's the direction you want to use for your pin stitch. It will pull into the fabric a bit better. Okay, but we'll get to stitching on even weave in a little bit. This might be quite a longer video than I anticipated. Maybe I will cut it into 2 parts. Okay, so that's pin stitch. There's also a diagonal pin stitch, which you can do as where you're actually completing part of your X. I have to think about it for a second. Okay. Let me get rid of these tails because they will annoy me. You guys know how I am about these little tails and hanging threads. Although I'm trying because I'm trying this new way of stitching. Okay, so to do a diagonal pin stitch, really, in essence, it's done the same. The principles and the movements are the same. You're just doing them on the diagonal. You're just doing them across the block. So I know I'm stitching with one hand and you can all holler at me. I hear you. I'm going to go down through the center. Okay. I'm going to leave my tail. I'm going to come up in the upper right-hand corner because my bottom stitch goes bottom left to upper right. I'm going to hold this down, and as I go down, I'm going to try and pierce that thread, my working thread, and pull it through. So now you see essentially what I made was a quarter stitch with a tail hanging out the middle. Okay. I'm going to come up in the bottom right. I'm going to keep my tail, keep holding it where it is. I'm going to again go down in the middle. Again, piercing as much of those threads as I can. This, ladies and gentlemen, is where a ballpoint needle is not your friend. You want a sharp needle if you are going to do these pin stitches because you want to pierce the thread in this case because that's what helps to hold it more securely. So I'm going to now pull that through. So as you see, that is the first part of my X. This is now in the way. So I'm going to actually come up in the bottom right. And before I go down in the top left, I'm going to trim this tail close and get rid of that. See, I'm pulling. It's not going anywhere. Go down in my top right and continue stitching. So that eliminates a little bit of a step. In fact, I think, well, really, they're just as neat as each other. It's, you know, it's a preference. It's first of all dictated, or not dictated, but look at what fabric are you using? Are you using Aida cloth where it's easy to do that? Are you using a Lugana where the fabric threads are a little harder to pierce? It's all a matter, really, this all boils down, words, to personal preference. What would you like to do? What works best for you? Because remember, it's all about what you want to do, not what everybody else thinks you should do. So I'm just going to, and you would end in whatever manner you choose to end with this. Okay, so I'm just going to pull that up out of the way. Okay, now I'm not going to show that one. I had a version of a pin stitch where it left a bar stitched like across the top of this. And that was okay, except I did not like, it looked like an outline stitch on top of your X. And was not, I went back through an old video of mine and I'm not a big fan of that one. I will show you this one though. It's another way you can, it's not really a pin stitch, but it is another way of securing your thread. So let me go over here a little bit. And what you do is you go down in your top right. Okay, this one, Teresa Little, yeah, I'm going to show you this one first. This one, Teresa Little Stitcher uses a lot, and she has had great success with it and hasn't had anything pull loose. But she leaves a little tail at the top. She comes up in her bottom left. Okay. All right. And I think her tail is just a wee little tail. And then she goes back down in that same hole as the tail and comes up in the bottom right. Now, what that does, and the reason this works, is because she's catching that thread on the back. Okay? So she's essentially, see if I can flip you over here. Here it is. So see, it lassoed that tail on the back. So that's not going to come. That's going to stay secure. It's not gonna come undone. Okay. Then you just continue your X's. And at this point, if you have a tail that doesn't go down through the fabric, you can clip it off. Maybe when I do this next stitch, it will go down through the fabric. Not quite. So then I would get my snag nabbit and pull it to the back and stop bumping the camera, Karen. Okay, I think I will. My nemesis is always tending to bump my camera. If you guys would only see how this is rigged. So that is another way to start. And then, of course, you know, you just continue stitching. And I will use this way quite frequently also. Again, that helps with the bulk on the back, because the more you're working threads in on the back, the more bulk you're going to create. So that's another option. One more option for starting is if you go down in your top right. Well, no, I actually have a couple more. Go down in your top right. Split the fabric thread that's between your top and bottom left. This way is a little bit bulkier, but it is an option that you can use. Leave your little tail, as we just did in the previous one. Go down again in the top right. So that just makes a little hook there. Come up in your bottom left. And again, that's caught the fabric in the back, or the thread in the back. And then just complete your X. That's another option for how to do that. And it hides your it's a little bit bulkier, but you know, once things are stitched around it, you're not going to see that. Okay, that's another option to start your thread. Now all of these can be used if you're stitching with 1 or 2 strands. Now, the technique that most of you guys that stitch with 2 strands totally love, and I cannot say as I blame you. I don't use this because I prefer not to stitch with 2 strands, but again, that's just my buoy here. That's just my personal preference. I prefer to stitch only with 1 strand of floss, but again, just my personal preference. But I'm sure, reasonably sure, that most of you out there already know this way of starting your thread, because I know many, many, many of you use it, but it is your loop start. Okay, I'm going to show you a single strand loop start on the even weave. Okay, so your loop start, you're going to go down through your fabric. You're going to leave your loop. You're going to come up in your bottom left. You're going to put your needle through that loop. You're going to go back down in the same hole that the loop was and pull it through. And that's your loop start that you pull from the... Why did this do this? Okay, guys, I don't know why it does it for me. My screen, my monitor wants to go to sleep. But you don't see that. I just have to get you back where I can see that I'm still in the frame and being good. So that's how you do that loop start from the back. It saves you from coming up through the fabric, going down through the fabric, flipping over and going through the loop. Do it from the front. Okay. And then you just continue on your merry way and do your X or X's or whatever it is that you're working on. Okay. And you just do your thing. Now, let me think. I think most people use one of these other techniques for ending their threads when they do a loop start. However, that being said, you could, for all intents and purposes, do a loop finish with 2 strands of floss, the same as it would be with 1 strand of floss on an even weave or linen. So the way you would do that is to do the first leg of your X. Hopefully I have enough thread left here to do it. Come up in your, I'm going to come up in the bottom left. I'm going to go, the bottom right. I'm going to go back down in the bottom right. I'm going to leave the loop. And I like to make the loop so that I can go through it as I'm coming up through the fabric. So I'm going to come up in my top right. I'm going to go through the loop. Okay, I'm going to pull it to my bottom left. And I'm going to go back down through the bottom left, pull the loop through. There's my loop finish. And just to be extra secure, I'm going to leave a little smidge of a tail, and a few stitches away, I'm just going to do a tacking stitch to hold it in place, and then I'm going to come up and cut my thread off. Now, the reason I do that is just to be sure that this is secure. Even though a loop start, I feel, is secure and not going to go anywhere. Well, a loop start isn't going to go anywhere because there is no other end. The finish, however, I just want to make sure that it's secure. So I do just a little tacking stitch to hold, and that's just to hold the thread in place so it can be stitched over. So that's your loop starts on 8 o'clock. Now, let me get a new piece of thread here. And I hope a lot of you all know this little technique. I see many people, okay, let me get, where are we here? Ooh, Karen, you got big hands. Many people going like this to separate their threads. And then this gets all curly and messy and whatever. If you don't know how to do this, take your thread, tap it on the end. Okay, that separates the strands. Just take one strand, continue to hold this between your thumb and forefinger, and just pull. And what it does, you'll see, okay, here we go. You'll see everything crinkling up in my hand. Don't feel like that's knotting, because look what it does. It falls right back. Oh, geez. Where's the camera? There we go. It just falls right back out. It does not knot up. So for those of you that don't know how to do that, give it a try. It's a whole lot easier than trying to step. And if you're stitching with 2 strands and you need to take 2 strands, you take 1 strand, then you pull 1 strand out, then you pull the 2nd strand out. Okay, now these are the next 2 things I'm going to show you are ways to start that I just recently learned. So I'm going to show them to you and put them out there, as they certainly are options for you. Is it something you want to use? Again, it's personal preference. Again, it depends on what and how you're stitching. On what fabric, what design are you doing? Are you comfortable with this? Is it something you want to do or not? It's, again, all of these things boil down to your own personal preference. So I just came across this technique, and what it was is to, the first one, go down through your fabric, and you know how you leave it, let me go up here a little bit. There we go. You know how you're leaving a tail on the back to stitch over? On this particular one, you leave a little bit of a tail on the front. You come up in your starting position. So wherever you're going down, wherever your starting position is, you're going down either above or below it, depending on how you stitch. Since I stitch bottom left to top right, I'm going to come up in the top left. If I would stitch top right to bottom left, I would come up in the respective hole. I would come up, if I stitch top to bottom, I would probably still come up in the same place, because I want this thread to lay the direction that I am going to be stitching. Okay, so I would just hold that tail, and the way they show this, and complete the first stitch. Sorry for the jiggles. And cover that over. So that's my first stitch. Then I would put this in line, and I would probably only stitch over it at best 3 stitches. So this is another way of starting from the front. I'm going to do the third stitch. Okay. And I know there are people, not many people use this technique, but I know there are people out there that do it. And now what I'm going to do is take this tail. Oh, my big hands look so big in that camera. Come on, come on. Here we go. I'm going to take that tail and clip it off close. Okay. And then just continue stitching. Now, since we're right up having our noses on this, of course, you can tell that there's a tail under there. However, I'm going to do a couple more because I'm going to show you another way to end. If I zoom you back out, you can't, depending on how far away, you can't really tell that there's anything underneath there. Okay. And once you have other stitches around it, it hides it. And even my being right up on it here, I can barely see that there's something underneath. Hopefully you're not getting the mower sounds because my neighbor is mowing pretty much right outside my window. And my husband will be over here mowing shortly. So hopefully you don't hear, if you do hear anything, it is the mowers. And our neighbor is also having a new roof put on. So if you hear hammering, that's what that is. So let me do a few more stitches here. And the other way I learned to end a thread is very similar to this method of starting your thread. Okay, so let me do a few more just to show you that. Now, both this start method and the end method that I'm going to show you can also be done on a even weave or a linen. So now what I learned, and I'm not quite sure how I feel about this yet, to be perfectly honest with you, but I'm going to show it to you anyway, just as another option. I'm going to split, well, I'm not going to go into the next stitch, but here at the end of this X, I'm going to split my thread, the fabric thread. I'm going to come up in the middle as if I were going to do a pin stitch, as if. However, instead of that, what I'm going to do is work my needle underneath these X's. And it takes a little bit of finagling. Okay, so can you see how it goes underneath the entire, both legs of the X? Okay, you with me? And then I'm going to just pull it through and trim it off. Now, I don't know that that's going to be a favorite way for people to start or end their threads. I do remember, and I can't remember if it was in a Facebook group or if it was in another forum that I was in, but there was a woman that's the only way she started and ended her threads. She never had to turn her work over because she started everything from the front and ended everything on the front. And again, if that's a method that is going to work for you, by all means, go for it. Absolutely go for it. This can be done on Aida cloth or even weave. Works exactly the same way. So things that can be done on both, I'm not going to show you for sake of time, because God forbid, I'm already at 45 minutes. I'm not going to show you how to do them on even weave. I'm just going to do things that are specific. Well, probably just the one strand loop start. Okay, because I think I covered. Oh, one more. One more. That is a new one that I learned. And it's just a way to start. I think it may hide a little bit, because the ending, you could choose any one of these other ways to end. But what that one is look at your top thread, fabric threads in your X's. This one probably is best used and only used on Aida cloth, not on an even weave, because I haven't quite figured out how you would do that. But what you do is come under the top, go under those top two threads, which would be those two vertical bars. Okay, and pull your thread through. And then go under the two horizontal bars. Pull your thread through. So this is essentially the same as, it just hides your thread a little bit better. And then I go down to the back. So I'm going to just pull this enough to tuck that end so that it just peeks out from under that vertical two bars. And then you just stitch as you normally do. Now, if you're a Aida cloth stitcher, this one I think it hides your start thread quite a bit better and you really don't see it at all, because it's hidden and yet it is very secure. And then ending your thread, you would use any of those other techniques. Now I'll tell you where I found, where I found these two methods to start was, I don't know if people seen it on if you've seen it on Instagram, or I'm not sure if they have it on Facebook or not, but there's a book or there's a program that you can take, and you can get the book called Tidy Back Technique. These are the methods that they use to start their threads, so that when you flip your work over, now because I crossed one X at a time, I get this. But if you worked across the row, your first leg, and across the row, your second, back across your second leg, all you get is straight up and down stitches. And you do not see where your threads are started. It's having your back essentially look the same as your front. So that's where I found those. And that's where I found this method of ending your thread. Okay, so that's pretty much it for Aida cloth. And I showed you the ones that are for Aida or Aida, and the ones that can be done on both. So let's switch this out for a piece of even weave. I have this new little contraption here for holding a hoop, which is awesome, and it makes it more comfortable for me. Okay, so I think really the only thing that I haven't showed you that is pretty much, well, and I actually did show you a loop, is how to do the single-stranded loop start on even weave or linen. Okay, because all of those others, the away thread, the pin stitch, I'll show you a pin stitch yet. Yeah, all the versions of pin can all be done on both. So, but I will show you how to pierce. Let's see if I can get you in just, oh, there we go. That's good. Now, single strand loop start, one strand of floss, loop start, and loop end. Okay, let me just get a sip here. Dry mouth from talking. So I am going to go down in my top left corner of my stitch. I'm going to leave a tail. I'm going to come up in the top right. I'm going to go back down in the top right and leave a loop. So this is really what I showed you on Aida cloth or Aida cloth. I'm going to come up in the bottom left, go through the loop, pull it towards the loop, go back down in the top right, and pull it through. Come up in the bottom right, complete my X, and keep on trucking. Okay. And then at some point, you can go back and cut that tail off. And cut it close as you can. So let's go back and trim that puppy off. And if you have a little, can't get quite close enough, just use your snag nabbit and pull that to the back. Okay. So now let me do one more stitch. Now let's pretend we have no more stitches of this color to do. So we're going to, this is our last stitch. There's no more stitches of the color. They aren't anyplace else. I have to end my thread. You're going to do the first half of your stitch. You're going to come up in the bottom right. You're going to go back down in the bottom right and leave your loop, however big or little you want to leave it. I kind of like to let them big because it's easier to grab. You're going to come up in your top right, go through the loop, pull it to the, I'm sorry, you're coming up in the top left, go through the loop, pull it towards the bottom right, go back down in that hole, and there you go. I again go a couple threads away, pierce the fabric thread, and do just a little tacking stitch to hold it in place, to hold that in place so I can stitch over it, and then come up to the front and clip it off. Now, pin stitch on even weave. You need a sharp needle. bottom line, you need a sharp needle. But you do it the same way as we did on Aida cloth. So let's do a pin stitch. I'm going to split my thread. And I should have brought my magnifiers. Okay, I'm going to go down through the middle. See how that fabric thread split in half? You can see that even though it looks like it's one thread, there's actually two little pieces of thread there. Okay, this is mushroom Lugana that I'm using. So I'm going to go down through the middle. Leave a tail. I'm going to come up by splitting that fabric thread in half, or as close to half as I can. And again, oh, I should have pulled this fabric tighter. That's my trouble. Again, you want to look at the direction of the top stitch on the intersection. So this one again is vertical. That's why I'm coming up vertically. Pull it through. Go back down in the middle. Move that out of the way. Split it again on the bottom. Go back down through the middle. Cut that off. And then do your X. Okay. There we go. And keep on going. So the other ways do exactly the same thing. If you want to start it as the first leg of your X, you do it the same way. You're just piercing the fabric threads instead of working with the holes in the, like you do in Aida cloth. In an even weave or a linen, you're just piercing the threads of the fabric in order to do that. Now, this, I believe, you will find it is easier to do if you keep a chenille needle handy for when you want to do that, because a chenille needle is much sharper than a tapestry needle, and it makes it easier to pierce those fabric threads. So I have some chenilles with my projects in case I want to do that, so that I can pierce those fabric threads easier. It can be done with a tapestry needle. However, it's a little bit harder to do it that way. So my suggestion is get yourself some chenille needles. So I think for the most part, I've talked about all the ways that I can remember that I've discussed in the past of how to start and how to stop your threads. If I missed any, or if you have questions, or if you need a further explanation, please leave me a comment or send me a message or drop me an email, and I will be more than happy to answer those questions for you. This was probably, well, I never anticipated that this video would go for an hour, but it did. And it's a lot of information in a rather short period of time. So if you have questions, feel free, let me know. You can reach me on Instagram. You can reach me on Facebook. You can put a message in my Discord. You can leave me a comment here, send me an email, whatever way works the best for you. And I will get back to you as soon as I can and try my very, very best to answer your questions. So, with that, my friends, I hope you found this helpful. I hope it was informative. I hope it has expanded your knowledge base of being able to start and end threads. So, with that, I am going to leave you. And remember my favorite saying, there are no rules in cross stitch. Don't let people steal your joy. You do you, because the only rules out there in cross stitch are the rules you make for yourself. So with that, have a great day, and I will see you next time. Oh, I thought I had